This was the only most little part of it. This was so yeah, I felt like I was supposed to be working and doing my water.
Shit. So it's now 1 minute past the appointed hour. Let's go. And there's plenty of room at the front of the room in case you hadn't noticed.
We're waiting for the hordes of.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is such a controversial topic. Everyone shows up for it. Oh, yeah. Hey, John. Nice to see you here, too. So, I have a bunch of the usual slides. Slides? Slides! Yep. Yep. And if you haven't seen the note well, you haven't been here long enough. You should read it. And the usual instructions about, remember to sign in, because otherwise we will not know that you're here.
It will look even less populated than we already are.
Yeah. And they used the number of signed-in participants to determine room sizes for the next meeting. So we might be meeting in a broom closet or something. But, so lots of resources, and we have an agenda. These slides are available on the meeting materials in case you didn't notice. So the agenda is identical to our London agenda. We have three documents and one subject for further discussion. And I think we're a little further along than we were in London. So let's just get on with it. Standard questions. Who has read the draft? Who supports going to working group last call at this time? And who thinks there are issues to be solved before working group last call? And we might want to take a look at the issue trackers, of which we have a few, but not very many issues. More people. I'm telling you, there's so much room at the front here. You can have a table. So, without further ado, Martin, do you want to talk about top level?
Well, whether I
Want to is perhaps too strong, but
yeah, this is Martin Durst. Well, first, this is the wrong slide.
I'm sure.
There should be an updated slide somewhere. I sent you a message that I updated it, so.
Yep, and I promptly lost it. Let me
Okay, so while Harold is finding the updated version of this slide, I have most of it in my head. So actually, not only version 2 was published shortly before the draft cutoff, but version 3 was published somewhere yesterday when the publication of
Oh.
drafts resumed.
That's what you did. I know, see.
And what these two together do, well, first they closed all the open issues. I did some edits and said this could probably be closed, and then Harald had a look at it and closed the issue because we are the only two on that specific who are active on that specific GitHub repository. And the additional things that happened was that I also made some editorial changes. So, for example, the abstract very much said like, well, this is something we could do. And now that it's in the working group and it's maybe close to last call, and so it can be written slightly differently. Oh, new deck is being shared. Great.
Still wrong?
Still not the one I worked on this morning. Something must have happened. Okay, so all the open issues on GitHub are closed, and there were some editorial cleanups, and also there was one thing that I added because we got the mail from somebody, Christian H something. I'm good at remembering initials, unfortunately, but not the rest of a name. And he proposed to have MIME types for integers and whatnot, and also for okay, yes, great.
I found them at last. I found them at last.
Yes, that's the slide I was talking about. So change closed all open issues, then editorial fixes, and then the middle one is say that media types are not a general type system. Yeah. And yeah, if it turns out that people want to ship around lots of little documents that say they contain an integer or what, then probably need a top level type for that. But before we are there, we probably don't. Yeah. So and yes, and then we came to the same conclusion. Maybe this document could be ready for a working group last call, if only that it helps that actually some more people read it. Yeah. Okay. That's it.
Yeah. So now the standard questions are: who has read the latest draft, the 03 version?
I've read the diff, and I read previous versions. So does it? Okay.
I have to admit that I didn't read it, but I wrote it.
That kind of helps. We have a person on the queue. So, Mutasami.
Yes, I just want to say that I have read it too.
Yeah, good. So, who thinks this is ready for working group last call? Who thinks it's not? Okay.
Actually, I'm not supposed to be voting.
Yeah. But that's so hard to tell. Yeah. So that's enough about that. Let me go back to the slide deck. Haptics. Alexei has a comment.
Yeah, I think it's ready for working with last call. The only question is, we want to have a document that exercises it, right? To make sure that the
Yes, that's next.
one. So
Yes.
the question is whether to have them both in the last call about the same time, or make sure that one of them waits for the other. Just to make sure they're consistent.
Yep.
Up to the chair, obviously.
Yep. I think we should have them one after the other, but because we have the draft that exercises it, so we can look at the draft to see if it's properly being exercised.
So this is Martin Durst. I'm supposed to say the name, yeah. So anyway, I think they can go to last call at different times. I think for if you ever get there for AFC publication, they probably should be published together because they have references.
Yep. Okay. Haptics. And now let me see what I promised. Should I give the stop the screen share?
Is that mic hooked up? Because Mario was noting in the chat that he can't hear that mic. So
Yeah, is it turned on? It was checked.
Okay, I turned the mic off when I finished speaking because that was the instruction, and then apparently Alexei spoke without the mic being turned on, and then I turned it on again. So that's what was commented on in the chat. So Alexei, if you want to give your comment again, if you want, I'll leave the mic on.
Alexei Melnikov, just to repeat my earlier comment, I suggested that the draft defining new media type, top level media type, and a draft exercising the process should be reviewed in some proximity to each other. Don't necessarily have to be in a working group last call at the same time, but it would be good if they're just reviewed for consistency.
Yeah, consistency is good. And with that, I'd like to move on to Mr. Muthashami.
Yes.
And saying that you can grant. You're supposed to be able to do this this deck sharing.
Right. Hang on just a
I
second
did
here.
upload the PDF version of your slides. I hope this is the right version.
I mean, am I able to, excuse me, share the PowerPoint version which I have on my PC, or is that not possible? It's not giving me the option of doing that.
I mean, you should have a share screen button, but I don't see a corresponding grant screen access. Can you try pressing the share screen button?
Okay, hang on.
Should be the third one in the top row.
Yeah. Let me try that one. Hang on. Okay,
Yeah.
I've requested a
then I get grant screen.
Okay.
So now.
Okay.
Now you should be. You should be successful in.
Okay, I think I am.
Counting the screen share.
Okay, here we go. It lets me specify what to share. Okay, are people able to see this?
Yes, and
okay.
For anything that is the same as what you said in London, I think you can skip over it lightly.
Okay, well, yes, I'm going to focus on just the key points which really have changed. So I'm going to go to slideshow mode and ask the question again. Are you still able to see this? Okay. All right. What has changed since IETF 115 all the comments that were raised at IETF115, as well as those logged into the issue tracker, have been incorporated into version 3 of the draft, and that has been online since February 8th. I have reviewed the latest version of what Martin uploaded. That is version 3 of the top level draft that was uploaded yesterday, I believe. And based on my reading, the haptics version 3 draft does indeed satisfy all the requirements that were listed in the latest sections 2.1 to 2.2, and I should add, it also is in compliance with the negative criteria mentioned in 2.3. And a real quick update on what has happened in the MPEG world, because this is a standards track RFC. The MPEG-I haptics phase 1 codec has passed the CD stage at MPEG 141 in January. It is now expected to move to the DIS stage at MPEG 142. The other MPEG spec, which is a carriage of haptics data, the revised working draft was issued at MPEG 141. And why is that relevant here? Because it defines the MIH1 subtype to refer to the MPEG-I haptic streams. And the last but not least, the MPEG-I immersive media scene description spec, 2 haptic extensions were approved for implementation, and they are part of the working draft. So now here...
We still see your PowerPoint, not your presentation, in not presentation mode.
Yeah, we see the editing version of the PowerPoint and just the first slide on the main. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Okay.
Good.
Now, okay. Hang on. So you are seeing the editing version.
Yes.
Okay. How about now? Do you
Still
see
seeing the editing version?
Okay. There seems to be some issue with Meet Echo, then it is not showing you the presentation version. Okay. Well, in the interest of time, I'm going to keep going with the editing version. Okay, do I have to repeat what I was saying?
No, I think that's fine.
Okay. Basically, everything which has been raised as an issue in the haptics draft has been addressed in version 3, which has been uploaded on February 8th. And all of the changes made to the top level draft I have reviewed, and I can safely say that the haptics draft is in compliance with what has been listed in 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3. That's the main gist of what I'm saying here. And the remaining slides are a point-by-point commentary on the criteria in section 2.1, and it basically says that that the haptics draft does satisfy all of those. I'll be more than happy to go through them point by point, or if people have read them or want to read them on their own, we can do it that way. Whatever works. Any preferences one way or the other? I'm not hearing anything either way, so. Okay, I just saw in the chat that there is at least one preference for point by point. So I can quickly run through that. So every new top level type needs to be in a standards track RFC, and that is indeed the intended status. As far as evidence of interest from the community, that has been listed in terms of the number of emails that have been received from Tencent America, Interdigital, and Razer. And all of those emails were sent to the media types list in November of 2022, just before IETF 115. And I also had sent to Harold the PDF of all of those emails for easy access. I think he should have it, or it should already be on the website. The INA considerations section of an RFC should be defined, and that is indeed being handled in section 4 of the draft. Moving along, all the subtypes that represent submodalities or formats of haptics would fall under this top level type. So I think there is no scope for any confusion in that regard. Moving to slide 4, there are actually 2 subtypes defined in this internet draft. As soon as this ID is approved, the registration of the actual types defined in the ID will be done and reflected in the final RFC. Moving to slide 5, there are actually a number of haptic subtypes actually in use and in existence at the time of writing, and all of these are documented in section 2.5. A quick example, the AHAP format, which is the standard haptic encoding in all iOS devices and iOS game peripherals. There is a proprietary extension to the OGG format, which has got haptics starting from Android 11, and the 2 proprietary, or rather vendor-specific haptic for formats, IVS and HAPT from Immersion, and they are used in the games and mobile haptic advertising. In addition, there are a number of haptic subtypes which are envisioned as part of the various standards, which are in flight in various stages of standardization, and a few have been documented in section 2.6. HMPEG, which is a haptics phase 1 coding format, HJIF, which is the interchange format, MIH1, which is a streaming format, and then moving on to the IEEE 1918.1.1, the HIED.
Yeah, I think we don't have to read them all aloud.
Yeah. And then the compliance with the required criteria. Section 3 does address the security considerations, and then as far as the proposers need to be willing, Immersion has specified 2 subtypes already in use. Razer is all set to go with their two subtypes, which is documented in the email of support that they sent back in November. And of course, once the respective standards are out, those subtypes will also be registered and will be taken into use. Moving along to slide 7, there are no undefined top-level haptic types. Of course, as far as the working group that should be instituted, we are in the MediaMan working group, and all the data formats or subtypes in the haptics ID, they do pertain to the sense of touch, and all of these the subtypes which are in the haptics ID, they do require a haptic subsystem, such as low-level haptic APIs, which in turn need specific hardware capabilities, such as 1 or more actuators. Moving to slide 8.
Yeah, I think this was referring to MIME type parameters, not properties of the subtypes. It seems a little bit misunderstanding.
Are you talking about
desirability for common parameters? I mean, do you want anything like car set equals or something like that? I don't think that's relevant for haptics, but it's
right.
It's just the fact that all haptics subtypes refer to haptics is kind of irrelevant to that particular criterion. So I think you can mark that criterion just as this isn't relevant.
Okay, all right. Fair enough. Okay, moving on to section 2.2, there is more there in that section. Top level types, they refer to the humans, well, this is the top level type pertaining to the sense of touch in much the same way that the existing audio and video, they pertain to the sense of hearing and vision. Common restrictions to all types, yes, they should all pertain to the sense of touch. And in terms of the multi-part and the top level types, I'm not going to read through the entire text of the criteria, except to say that files containing haptics without any accompanying audio and video will be directed to the appropriate haptic device. So for just as a matter of example, if you have a bodysuit or a chair, these can process haptics only files. Moving on to slide 9. This is a new section, I believe, in Martin's draft. And thankfully, from my reading at least, I did not need to make any changes to my draft to say that it is in compliance. And I would just say that there are no such instances where it's pointed to another registration space. There are no mappings whatsoever in the haptics ID that would, and so we are fine as far as that section is concerned. And this is, the purpose of this is to not to map to other type systems. So we are fine in that regard as well. Going to the last slide that I have, the top level type is not generating any such aliases, and it is also that does not have an X prefix. So that brings me to the end of what I had as a presentation. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions from the comments? Not seeing anyone on the queue.
Okay.
So standard questions. Who has read the draft? Oh, that's bad. We'll have to get some more reviews on it. I mean,
I have read an earlier draft, but
I have also read an earlier draft.
This latest draft has been online since the 8th of February. So.
Yeah. So given the information you have on the draft, whether you have read it or just listened to the presentations, who thinks this is ready for working group last call? Yeah. Who thinks it's not? Okay. We seem to have support for sending out the last call on it.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. We have successfully navigated one more item of the slide deck.
Okay.
Let me see if I can get back my agenda slide. Share. I'm trying to find my point again. Yeah. This was haptics. Next question is suffixes.
Hi, Harold. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Can I have the screen? I've got updated slides.
If you request,
I did request.
if you request the slide, yep, ground screen.
Great, thank you.
Come on, now we can do this. Ground screen. Oh, I have to stop presenting first, I think. Ground screen. Yeah,
There we
now
go.
it works.
Thank you. I see it.
Takes some
And-
getting used to every time.
Yeah. Okay, can you see the full screen presentation?
Yep. So the floor is yours.
Can you hear my audio?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I shared full screen and my audio cut out. Okay. And you can see the full screen presentation, yes?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the MediaMan suffixes draft. Changes since the last IETF. I went through and addressed all the issues, except for one big showstopper issue that we need to talk about today. We were ready to go to last call before I had a discussion with one of the reviewers, and we'll cover why I don't think it's ready for last call just yet. Published a new -03 version, mainly with just more explanatory text. There were 2 new reviews that came in. Nothing much changed in the general strategy for how we treat suffixes, the algorithm from the last IETF. The newest, thing that happened is we think we have found a better algorithm for processing media type suffixes, and that's primarily what we need to kind of talk about today. The problem with the current algorithm is that we made an attempt to reverse engineer what should happen when you see multiple plus signs in a media type. Like, how should you treat it? How should a processing pipeline handle it? And we did that by looking at the entire IANA registry and then the entire suffixes registry, and trying to determine a set of rules that would work for everything. And that led to kind of a weird, I don't want to say weird, but it wasn't an entirely straightforward way to reason about it based on general knowledge that people have about the media types registry. In fact, a number of the reviewers and implementers that we've discussed this with had no idea that the suffixes registry existed. These are people with like 15, 20 plus years of experience. The existence of the suffixes registry was a surprise to them. So the new proposed solution is to kind of ignore the exceptions that we see in the media types table in the IANA registry and in the suffixes registry, and try to kind of build an algorithm from first principles. The outcome really isn't changed that much. So here's just to summarize the difference between the old algorithm and the proposed new algorithm. On the left here is what we currently have for the algorithm. So I'm using the verifiable credential plus LD plus JSON media type. Proposed media type has 2 plus signs in it. The current algorithm basically says if you are processing this media type, try to process the whole thing by itself. And if you don't know how to process the whole thing by itself, but you do know about media type suffixes, then chop everything to the left of the first plus sign off and look it up in the media types registry and follow the rules there for processing the media type. And if it's got, more than 1 plus in it and you don't know how to handle that, chop off one of the plus bits and then go to the media type registry, the suffixes registry, look up the suffix and process it according to the rules there. That's kind of what we have today. The problem with that is that you end up bouncing between the media types table and the suffixes registry, and the suffixes registry is a bit hard to navigate. We're suggesting the new way of doing this is to just use the media types table. Don't use the suffixes registry. So you get this whole media type in, you see if you can process it. If you can't process it, you chop off the subtype up to the first plus. You see if you know how to process that media type. And if you don't know how to process that media type, you chop off the next chunk up to the plus. You look up that media type and you try to process it. That works for most of the media types, if not, well, nearly all of the media types in the IANA registry, except for things like image, SVG plus XML, right? Because when you do that kind of chopping activity for image, SVG, XML, you end up with image/XML, which does not have a registered media type. So there's a way that we could.
Sorry.
So all this to say is that there's a way we could add in exceptional cases. We could add a new media type in the media types table to the algorithm. I just need some guidance from the reviewers and the group on exactly what to do here. Another outcome of the discussion today could be, we don't think this is a problem, use the current algorithm. So that's it. Who's reviewed the draft? Harold, Martin, Yvonne, Graham, Murray, Mark, Roberto, Pauly, Ori's new, and Ted's reviews new. Are we ready to go to last call yet? Ted has convinced me that we're not ready quite yet. We need to address this one last issue. It's not really a huge change to the specification, but it is a change. I guess the question is, could we make this change and make a call to go to last call over the mailing list? Once we're in last call, we probably need review by the W3C working groups that are depending on the suffixes draft, which is the verifiable credentials working group, the DID working group, and the REF working group. That's it for the presentation. I'll jump back to the slide here for the main topic of discussion. Okay.
So now we have Martin first in the queue. Yeah.
Okay, my name is Martin Durst. First, I was listed on having read the document. I have read an earlier version, but I think not the latest version. Second point, with this, wouldn't it be just, possible for, but we just say if it's plus XML, then go look at application/XML, yeah? Is that what would be on the left side now? Or is that an exception? You want that to be just an exception for that specific case?
It's an exception for the specific case.
I think it's a bad, sorry.
We have multiple options. We can either make an exception for a specific case. We can say a general thing like if you're in the image top level type, switch to application and see if you find a matching media type. Like this is really the only exception I could find that doesn't work for the rule set on the right is image XML.
Okay.
Or sorry, SVG XML.
Okay, thanks for the explanation. I think it's a very good idea, and thanks for all the work to check all the examples. But I think it's a very bad idea to say, okay, we found only one example that doesn't work, and so we make an exception for that. And I think we should just, for each suffix, we can just say how it should be treated if nothing more specific can be done. Is that too much?
It might be too much. Well, this is the input that I need. So there are three options I think we should probably discuss on the mailing list. I think each one of them has benefits and drawbacks.
Okay, so I think we can go to the next queue then.
Brent Sundell.
Brent Zundell, speaking as the chair of the VC working group and the DID working group who are relying on this, while I do support the idea of the suffixes and I've read the draft, I don't feel it's ready for last call. I mean, primarily due to this, what do we do about this situation? I think it needs to be resolved before it goes to last call. And I look forward to that conversation because this got to be worked out.
Alexei Malikov. So what's the problem with the current text? I didn't quite hear
it's not as clean as the proposal on the right. The current text
It's just a
requires.
table lookups. It doesn't matter.
Sure.
just-
Yeah, I mean, that's one argument. Ted's arguing pretty strongly that most developers don't know about the suffixes table, and the table lookup there is strange, and it would be cleaner just to use the algorithm on the right, which does result in
The problem
same
is,
end
yeah,
result.
the algorithm on the right makes assumptions that every suffix will have a specific subtype with the same name as a suffix, which is okay.
To date, that's true.
Maybe it's true. It's true so far, but that's just by accident, right? We can make this assumption, but it's kind of a bit hacky.
Okay, thank you for the input.
Mark?
Yeah, Mark Nottingham. Martin's comment, I think I agreed with, and I think he made me realize that these are both, they both will require you to define handling for suffixes and suffix combinations. And so really it's syntactic sugar. And Alexi's comment made me think that syntactic sugar is probably misleading in that you think you know what it means and it doesn't. So I actually am leaning to not making this change. I think if you were to make this change, you would need to, well, either way, you need to define handling for each suffix.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that I was thinking before earlier was, in your exception down there, maybe the rule that you need to introduce is that you only do this kind of trimming when there are multiple suffixes and you don't trim the last suffix, because then you're just adding a new requirement. I mean, a large part of the problem here, I think, is that you're retrofitting a new requirement onto existing suffixes and existing handling. And that's something that needs to be done very carefully. So, maybe one way out of this is to kind of not do that and only have this kind of trimming when there are multiple suffixes still on the media type.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you, Mark. That's a new option. Okay, so I'm hearing. Well, there are more people on the queue. I'll wait.
Yeah, so I don't bother with switching mics, but speaking as a participant, I think both of these can be solved by actually registering the things that are not in the table at the moment. Like we could register image XML just to catch the exception case, but this is not the only issue. Yeah. I also raised an issue about fragment identifiers. If we have application / VC plus LD plus JSON plus gzip, and an object identifier with a fragment identifier on it, what's the rule for it? And that led me to the sad experience of trying to read the suffix registry.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you haven't read the suffix registry, you should, because there are some entries there that are, well, for instance, the suffix rule, the fragment identifier rule for gzip says that if there is a gzip rule, then follow the gzip rule, and if there isn't a gzip rule, then follow the gzip rule, which was obviously an editing mistake, but that's what it currently says. So I kind of like the approach on the right because it avoids dealing with this registry that I think is in a bad state, but we could fix the registry. Okay, that's my little participation.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, Harold, there's a new section in the suffixes draft that generalizes that column that you're talking about, because the column you're talking about, the fragment identifier column, has been copied and pasted over and over and over again. It's the same text with minor modifications. So we really should get rid of that column and just point to one place, which is in the suffixes draft today. So +1 on the the fragment identifier comment you made. I'm trying to fix that both in the spec and the registry. The other question I had for the group is, can we do that? Can we clean up the registry? There's a bunch of text in there, and we would have to make a decision to clean the text up. Like I said, it is copied and pasted text, and we can redirect it to a section of the spec. I just don't know if we had the power to do that as a working group.
We do have a charter item on revising registration procedures, so I think it could be stretched to cover that.
Okay.
Martin?
Yes, I think if we think this is about suffixes, yeah? And if we think that the registry for the suffixes needs fixing, and I agree it needs fixing, then we should do the right thing here and say how to fix it. Yeah?
Yeah. So, drawing a conclusion from the discussion, I think we can say safely that version 03 is, the last published version is not ready for working group last call. We have items to discuss on the list. Any other conclusions we should draw about suffixes?
The cleanup of the registry, is that something we definitely want to do? I mean, I'm very much in favor of cleaning up the registry.
I see. Alexei.
Alexei Mankov, yeah, I would like to do that, but it doesn't have to be in your document.
Okay. Well,
yeah, so it's basically, it doesn't have to be your sole responsibility to clean it, you know, other people can help, so.
+1, thank you.
And as a media type reviewer, I would like to clean it.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, that's the agenda point for suffixes. Martin, last comment?
Yeah. One question is, why did these things that, for example, Harold mentioned, the strange texts that were just copied, why did they get in there in the first place? Was there a reviewer who was sleeping on that issue, or just overlooked it? Or we should try to figure out, not to blame anybody, but to make sure that it works a bit better in the future.
Yeah, to respond to that, the suffixes registry, unfortunately, has been used as a place to write normative text in columns that were meant to really just point to specifications. So the fragment identifier is a good example of that. And like, there's a security considerations column where people wrote security considerations in the registry instead of in the specifications, right? And so it's stuff like that, the worst of that is in the fragment portion of the registry, but there are also some questionable usages of the security considerations column in the registry as well. You know, it's up to the group. The problem is that if we remove that text from the registry, it doesn't exist anywhere else. Like, it doesn't exist in the specs. So that may be another thing that we want to look at if we're committing to cleaning up the registry.
Martin, do you want to have the queue again? Or is it just leftover? Leftover. Okay, we have more work to do. So we now have, at my time, 10 minutes left in a meeting. And my agenda said that said that we had the last slot for discussing changes to procedures, which I think registry is, the suffixes registry is a good example of stuff that we are chartered to do. So Mark, do you want to say anything about that? Sure. Your current thinking there?
Yeah, so there were two threads in that discussion, and one was regarding the actual mechanism, the interface for registration. We talked about using GitHub and versus the form that currently exists in the processes. I think the place we ended with that was that it's interesting because using a tool like GitHub gives you the advantage that you have evidence of the processing. You have a public record. Whereas when you fill out the current form, it's a bit of a black box. But that doesn't necessarily require any changes to the documents we're responsible for to make changes there. It's an implementation deal, and it can actually be handled by the experts. Yeah. Excuse me. So the more interesting part of the discussion then, in the other thread, is something that we discussed in London, I believe, which is we kind of came out of that meeting with the notion that we wanted to open up registration in the standards tree more, and we wanted to open it up to especially open source. And I went away and thought about that and started to write about it, and came to a place where I wasn't terribly happy with it, because open source isn't really the property we're looking for. Often an open source project is either very small and ephemeral, or even if it's big, it could be effectively proprietary. There's no interoperability with other things. It's just happens to be open source. What we're really looking for is shared formats, interoperable formats that have some of the properties of things we usually expect from standards, but haven't gone through a formal process. And so what I proposed on List, I believe in February, is that we instruct the what are you guys called? Media type reviewers. Thank you. That they are allowed to. They have discretion to allow things into the standards tree based on a number of criteria, which I won't go into in detail. But it's things that you look for. Good documentation and open projects and a robust community and some amount of deployment. Just to give them the ability to discern, to avoid abuse of this license that they have, so that people with tiny little projects can't come up and squat on a name or something like that. And that seemed to go over pretty well on the List. I think the response was pretty good to that. So from a working group perspective, I think the next step is to continue that discussion and figure out, maybe we need a consensus call in terms of, is that the direction we want to take the standards tree in, and then figure out how it gets incorporated into the right documents and work on the detail.
Yep. So the instructions for the reviewers are supposed to come either from documents and defining a registry, or from the IS3, I believe. So
that has to be an RFC, right?
Right. And what I did, I haven't kept up to speed on what documents this group is revising versus publishing wholesale new. It could be a new document. It could be a revision of a current document. Yeah, whatever makes sense. That's details.
Yeah, so all the documents we have so far are new documents. We haven't started opening up documents yet. So either could make sense.
I think we could probably publish a quite compact document that would update the current RFCs established in the registry.
Yeah.
Alexei Melnikov, I suggest we start with just a little updating document, and if you realize that there is so much interrelation with the original one, then we can discuss basically. It makes sense. So yeah, let's try not to reopen the big document done by Ned and John Clancy until we have to.
Yeah. Okay.
Well then, as a practical path forward, then I could draft the document and then circulate it, and then if it looks good, we could do a call for adoption, and that serves as the consensus call to launch on the work, I suppose.
That sounds appropriate to me. I think you're free to use the repo we already have created for storing the document if you want to. I have Martin, Manu, and John on the speakers queue.
Yes, I think I also remember the list of criteria that Mark sent, and either I reply positively, or I can say that now that I found this list of criteria really good. I mean, each of them needs some kind of in actual use, it needs some careful evaluation, but I think the list is really good. One thing that might be, my document, I think, updates some of the registration stuff, and it might turn out that I do an update and Mark's document does an update for the same document. So maybe at some point we have to think whether that's what we want to do or whether we throw these two together. So, but at the moment, the time mine is much more advanced than the.
Yeah, let's not create dependencies before we have to.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Manu.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about a subpart of what you mentioned, Mark, that had to do with using GitHub to do registrations and processing. I'm very much in favor of doing something like that. Is that a part of the proposal, or were you mentioning that in passing?
Mentioning in passing, mostly because we've talked about this in other venues, and it turns out you really don't need to put anything in the documents to do that. It just needs the experts and the folks who are responsible for the registry to want to do it. So, yeah.
Great, thanks. To provide some input on that, we are starting to manage registry, well, quote unquote registries like that at W3C, the DID registry and the verifiable credentials registry, and it's working out really nicely. It's really easy to track, like who requested what the reviewers on the edition is, and that sort of thing. So +1 to using source control system with comments to manage that versus a mailing list. Thanks.
John, you're in the queue.
I'm feeling some discomfort in my already uncomfortable position as the remaining co-author of 6838, who seems to be even vaguely following this, and the only surviving co-author of 2048. One of the principles there was to create considerable pushback against innovation. I think Martin's document on the top level types has that about right, but I want to be very careful that in the process of making this easier or better documented, we don't lose sight of the principle that fewer media types are better, and we don't lose sight completely of the principle that the reason why there are parameters out there at the right edge is to deal with some of these micro details rather than having those become part of the media types. In the conversations which led us to where we are, those things are considered very important principles, and I'm a little afraid as these things evolve and get twitched that gets lost by accident. I don't mind it getting lost as long as it doesn't get lost by accident.
I'd like to respond to that. John, it's Mark. I hear you and I agree with you. The intent here is not to open up and have a flood of new media type registrations or even to lower the quality bar. It's to engage with communities that don't really know how to navigate the IETF or other standards processes even. And to ideally, I would like to see this as a two-way thing where they bring things to us to register more easily, but also in that process, we can give them a little more help in improving the quality of their registration.
We've been feeling out in other contexts the idea of making it more efficient and more obvious and better supported to put a quasi-tutorial or a quasi-guide function in the middle of these registration loops to deal with exactly that problem, rather than making the loops both more complicated and easier for stuff to get through because people are unfamiliar with the process. I've been thinking recently, because of two other contexts, that perhaps in the registration process we need to appoint two new functions. One of which is that guide for the outsider function, and the other of which is an explicit devil's advocate in charge of pushing back. But those are just sort of wild ideas.
Okay. Thanks for the input. Mark has taken on action items. And we're out of time. We have 2 last calls to write. They will run, I think they will run from after the IETF has ended and for 2 weeks. And we'll take it from there. Thank you all for coming. Meeting closed.
Thank you.
Let me see, is there?
Another advantage of doing the GitHub type thing is we've been asking Anna for a long time for some way to have a queue that the reviewers can get access to. It's going to take them
exactly
years.
what it
to do.
provides. And that's why we get some via the other registries.
Yeah.
I know, they're not very responsive.
It's not so much that, it's just they have a large backlog and a very small engineering team.
They're very good at turning the crank.
Yeah.
In terms of process,
Yeah.
you know,